The solution to the given system of equations is xy. What is the value of y? Okay, so we have these two equations, and we need to find a value of x and y that satisfies both of them. So from the first equation, 3x equals 12, we can solve for the value of x. So we can divide both sides by 3. So on the left, we'll just get 1x is equal to 12 over 3, which is just 4. So the value of x is 4. And we can plug that into the second equation to solve for y. So in the second equation, negative 3 times 4, the value of x is just 4 now, plus y, which is what we're going to solve for, and it equals negative 6. So negative 3 times 4 is negative 12, plus y equals negative 6. So then to isolate for the value of y, we can add 12 to both sides, which will cancel out the 12 here and just add a 12 to the right side. So y equals negative 6 plus 12, which is 6. So the value of y is equal to 6, which is answer choice B. Which expression is equivalent to 11x cubed minus 5x cubed? So we have this expression, 11x cubed minus 5x cubed. And we can simplify this down by noticing that these are like terms, since they both have an x cubed term. So we can combine like terms by just adding or subtracting the coefficients. So here we can just do 11 minus 5. So 11 minus 5 is 6, and we just keep the x cubed term. So 11x cubed minus 5x cubed is just 6x cubed, which is answer choice B. How many solutions does the given equation have? So we have this equation 66x equals 66x. So we can simplify this equation by just dividing both sides by 66. And when we do that, we get that 1x is equal to 1x. So just by looking at this equation, we can see that no matter what value we plug in for x, like 1 or 100 or 20, both sides of the equation will always be equal. So no matter what value we give to x, this equation will always be true. And there are infinitely many values that we can insert into x. So this equation has infinitely many solutions, since we can put in any value and the equation will be true. So C is the correct answer. A proposal for a new library was included on an election ballot. A radio show stated that 3 times as many people voted in favor of the proposal as people who voted against it. A social media post reported that 15,000 more people voted in favor of the proposal than voted against it. Based on these data, how many people voted against the proposal? So let's say that X number of people is the number of people who voted against the proposal. And that would mean that 3x, so 3 times x, is the number of people who voted for the proposal. We can see that they stated that in the problem here, that 3 times as many people voted in favor than those who voted against. So that would mean the quantity 3x minus x would equal how many more people voted for the proposal than those that voted against. And the problem states that the number of people that voted in favor was 15,000 more than those who voted against. So 2x has to equal 15,000. Since subtracting those who voted against from those who voted for tells us how much more those who voted for the proposal were than those who voted against. So then we can just solve for the value of x here, so 15,000 divided by 2 is just 7,500. So the value of x is 7,500. And we up here made x equal to the number of people who voted against. So the question asks us for the number of people who voted against, which is just the value of x. So 7,500 is the answer, which is answer choice A. Caleb used juice to make popsicles. The function f of x equals negative 50x plus 30 approximates the volume in fluid ounces of juice Caleb had remaining after making x popsicles. Which statement is the best interpretation of the y-intercept of the graph of y equals f of x in the xy plane in this context? So let's draw a sketch of this function. So on the x-axis, we'll put number of popsicles, and on the y-axis, we'll put the amount of juice left. So this will be x and this will be y. And this function looks something like this. It's a downward sloping function since the slope is negative 5 here, which is a negative number, and the y-intercept will be at y equals 30 on the y-axis up here. So this graph basically tells us that every time that Caleb makes a popsicle, the amount of juice remaining decreases. And the y-intercept, which is the value of the amount of juice at x equals 0, and here x is the number of popsicles. So when Caleb has not made any popsicles yet, the amount of juice left is the y-intercept. So the y-intercept of this graph is 30, which means that when 0 popsicles have been made, Caleb has 30 fluid ounces of juice remaining, which means that he initially started with 30 ounces. So the y-intercept is how much juice that Caleb had initially, before he made any popsicles, which is answer choice C. An angle has a measure of 16 pi divided by 15 radians. What is the measure of the angle in degrees? Okay, so we have an angle that measures 16 pi by 15 in radians. And we want to convert that to degrees. So we know that there are 180 degrees in 1 pi radian. So if we multiply these two quantities together, we can see that the radians here would cancel out, and we would be left with a units of degrees in our answer. So we just simply need to multiply the angle in radians by the quantity that 180 degrees are in 1 pi radian. So when we multiply these two together, the radians will cancel out, and we will be left with 192 degrees. The pi's here also cancel out, so all you need to put into your calculator is 16 times 180 divided by 15. So the answer is 192 degrees. Which point xy is a solution to the given system of inequalities in the xy plane. So we have these two inequalities, and we need to see which of these points satisfies these two inequalities, which really just means when we plug in x and y from any of these points, it should satisfy both equations, which means that both sides should be true. Okay, so let's first try answer choice A. So answer choice A says that x is equal to negative 14 and y is 0. So we'll just plug those into these equations. So in the first equation, y is 0. It is less than x, which is negative 14, plus 7. And we can simplify that to 0 is less than or equal to negative 7, which is not true because 0 is greater than negative 7. So we can immediately rule out answer choice A, because the point negative 14, 0 does not satisfy the first equation. After plugging in negative 14, 0 into the first equation, we get an incorrect final inequality. So let's try answer choice B, which says that x is 0 and that y is negative 14. So for the first equation, answer choice B says that negative 14 is less than or equal to 0 plus 7, which is true. Negative 14 is less than or equal to 7. But now let's plug answer choice B into the second equation. So the second equation says that negative 14 is greater than or equal to 2 times x, which is 0, 2 times negative 2 times 0 minus 1, which simplifies to negative 14 is greater than or equal to negative 1, which is incorrect. Negative 14 is a larger negative number than negative 1, which means negative 14 is actually smaller than negative 1. So we can rule out answer choice B as well, since it does not satisfy the second equation. Okay, and then answer choice C says that x is 0 and that y is 14. If we plug that into the first equation, it will say 14 is less than or equal to 0 plus 7. And that is incorrect because 14 is a larger number than 7, not a smaller or equal to number to 7. So answer choice C does not satisfy the first equation, so we can rule it out. And then answer choice D says that x is equal to 14 and y is equal to 0. So when we plug that into the first equation, we will get 0 is less than or equal to 14 plus 7, which is true. 0 is less than 21. And then when we plug in answer choice D into the second equation, we will get 0 is greater than or equal to negative 2 times 14 minus 1, which simplifies to 0 is greater than or equal to negative 28 minus 1, which is just 0 is greater than or equal to negative 29, which is true because negative 29 is a negative number, so 0 is greater than negative 29. So since answer choice D, which is 14, 0, these x and y values satisfy both of these equations, meaning that they result in final inequalities that are both accurate. 0 is greater than or less than negative 29, and 0 is less than or equal to 21, then answer choice D is correct. A right triangle has legs with lengths of 24 centimeters and 21 centimeters. If the length of this triangle's hypotenuse in centimeters can be written in the form 3 times square root of d, where d is an integer, what is the value of d? So we have this right triangle whose legs have a length of 24 centimeters and 21 centimeters. And the hypotenuse can be written in the form 3 times square root of d. So we can solve for the hypotenuse of this triangle by using Pythagorean's theorem that a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where we can make 24a and 21b the lengths of the two legs, and then c is the hypotenuse. So we'll just solve for the value of c. Okay, so a is 24 squared plus b, which is 21 squared, and then this will equal c squared. So then to solve for the value of c, we can take the square root of both sides. So when we take the square root of c squared, we're left with just c, and then the square root of 24 squared plus 21 squared. So if you put in your calculator 24 squared plus 21 squared, you'll get 1017. So the square root of that is equal to c. We can simplify down this square root to 9 times 113, since 9 times 113 is equal to 1017. And since this is a square root, the square root of 9 is just equal to 3. So this we can simplify to square root 3, and the 113 will remain inside. So now we've written c, which was the hypotenuse of the triangle, in the form of 3 times the square root of something. And the problem tells us that something in the square root is equal to d. So the value of d is equal to 113. So 113 is the answer. Dataset A and dataset B each contain 27 values. The table shows the frequencies of the values for each dataset. Which of the following statements best compares the means of the two datasets? So we have this table here that shows us the values, which are 30, 34, 38, 42, and 46, and then the frequency for each dataset. So here, this 2 says that dataset A has 2 30s in it, and that dataset B here, the 9 says that dataset B has 9 occurrences of the value 30. So if we were to list out the values in dataset A, it would look something like this. So first we would have 2 30s, so 30 and 30, and then we would have 4 34s, since it says the frequency or the amount of times that something occurs. So 34, the value 34 has 4 occurrences, so 34, 34, 34, and 34. And we would just go on and on until we get through all the values. So to find the mean of this data set, instead of adding up all these numbers together, we can just multiply the value times its frequency, which tells us how many times it occurs, to find, and then we can divide that by the total number of values, which is 27, to get the mean. So the mean for data set A would look something like this. 2 times 30, so 2 is the frequency and 30 is the value. And since 30 occurs 2 times, we multiply by 2, and then we can add 4 times 34, and then 5 times 38, plus 7 times 42, plus 9 times 46. So if we were to put this into our calculator, we would get a value of 1094. And then we can divide this 1094 by 27, since there are 27 values in the dataset A, to get the mean. So the numerator here, 1094, is like all the values added together, and then the denominator here is the number of values, which is the formula for the mean of a data set. So if we put this into our calculator, 1094 divided by 27 equals about 40.5. Okay, and then the mean for data set B, we would do a similar process. So we would multiply the frequency by the value and add all those together to get the numerator, and then the denominator will be 27 again, since there are 27 total values. So we would do 9 times 30 plus 7 times 34 plus 5 times 38 plus 4 times 42 plus 2 times 46. And if we add all that together, we get 958. So then 958 divided by 27, if we put that into our calculator, 958 divided by 27 is equal to about 35.48. So now we can see that the mean of dataset A, which is 40.5, is greater than the mean for dataset B, which is 35.48. So the answer choice that says that is dataset A, or answer choice A, says that the mean of dataset A is greater than the mean of dataset B. So A is the correct answer. Triangle XYZ is similar to triangle RST, such that X, Y, and Z correspond to R, S, and T, respectively. The measure of angle Z is 20 degrees, and 2 times XY equals RS. What is the measure of angle T? So we have two triangles here that are similar. So triangle X, Y, and Z, and then triangle R, S, T. And we are given that the measure of angle Z is 20 degrees, and that the length from XY, 2 times that, is equal to RS. So say that say that the distance from XY is the value, so let's say V, then that means the distance from R to S is 1/2 of V. Okay, and we need to find the measure of angle T. So we can actually just stop here and realize that since both of these triangles are similar, then by the angle theorem, all three angles in one triangle must be congruent to the angles in the other triangle, since they are similar triangles. And since angle Z corresponds to angle T, angle Z and angle T must have the same angle. Since Z is 20 degrees, then angle T must also be 20 degrees. So C is the correct answer. Keenan made 32 cups of vegetable broth. Keenan then filled X small jars and Y large jars with all the vegetable broth he made. The equation 3x plus 5y equals 32 represents this situation. what is the best interpretation of 5y in this context? So we have this equation, 3x plus 5y equals 32, and this represents our situation. So 32 here is the total number of cups of vegetable broth. And since this equation equals 32, this side of the equation must also equal 32. And in the context of this situation, this side should represent the total number of cups of vegetable broth. So x here is the number of small jars, while y is the number of large jars. And multiplying 3 with the number of small jars here gives us the total number of cups in small jars. And then multiplying 5 with y gives us the total number of cups of vegetable broth in large jars. So in this case, 5y, the quantity, tells us the total number of cups that are being kept in large jars. And when we add that with the total number of cups being kept in small jars, that will give us the total number of cups, because all the cups are either in small or large jars, and the quantity 5y tells us how many of those cups are in the large jars. So answer's choice C is the correct answer. What is the sum of the solutions to the given equation? So we have this equation here, and we need to find values of x that satisfy this equation, which really means we need to find values of x that when we plug in, both sides of the equation will stay equal. So we can solve this by first moving everything to one side. And before we do that, we need to expand out this parentheses here by distributing the x. So x times x is x squared, x times 1 is x, and then minus 56, which equals, so 4x times x is 4x squared, 4x times negative 7 is negative 28x. So to move everything from the left side to the right side, we can subtract negative x squared, subtract x, and add 56 to both sides, which will cancel out these terms here and move them to the right. So on the left side, we'll be left with 0. And then on the right side, we'll have 4x squared minus x squared, which is 3x squared, negative 28x minus x, which is negative 29x, and then we'll have a positive 56 on this side. Okay, so now we need to factor this quadratic, but this doesn't seem to be factorable by grouping, so we should use the quadratic formula instead. So the quadratic formula goes like this. So, okay, let me write the formula up here. X equals negative b plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. And these constants here, a, b, and c, come from a quadratic equation of the form 0 equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So in this case, a is 3, b is negative 29, and c is 56. Okay, so let's plug these values of a, b, and c into the quadratic formula. So negative b, so negative 29 is just 29, plus minus square root b squared. So if we get out our calculator, so 29 squared is equal to 29 times 29 is equal to 841. And then we have to subtract 4 times AC. So that will be negative 4 times 3 times 56. and that will be all over 2a. So a is 3, so 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, so we can simplify this down by solving this multiplication here. So 29 plus minus square root 841 minus, let's get our calculator back out, so 4 times 3 times 56 is 672. So 672 all over 6. Okay, so now we can just plug this into our calculators, and we should get two values of x because there's a plus minus here. So our first value of x will be 7, and the other value of x will be 2.666, or 2.667 if you round. So these are the two values of x we'll get when we plug this expression into our calculator. One with a positive sign here, and then one other one with a negative sign here. And the question here asks us for the sum of the solutions. So we have two solutions here, and we just need to add these two together. So when we add 7 with 2.667, we'll just get 9.667. So the sum of the two solutions to this equation is 9.667. The function f of x equals 1/9 times the quantity x minus 7 whole squared plus 3 gives a metal ball's height above the ground. F of x in inches, x seconds after it started moving on the track, where x is greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 10. Which of the following is the best interpretation of the vertex of the graph of y equals f of x in the xy plane? So we have this function here, f of x, that gives us the height of the ball above the ground as a function of x, the number of seconds after it has started moving on a track. So we can graph this function in our graphing utility, and it will look like this parabola. So we graph the function of y equals f of x as a function of x, this number of seconds. So the x-axis will tell us how many seconds have passed, and the y-axis tells us the height of the ball. And from the problem statement, it tells us that x is only valid between 0 and 10. So we're only going to care about the parts of the graph between x values of 0 and 10. So this means at an x value of 0, the function here has a y value of 10, or this y value right here. So the ball starts with this certain height, and we can see from the parabola that this height starts decreasing as x increases. So it's initially a decreasing function. And the height here decreases until we get to the vertex. So at x equals 7 seconds, we reach this vertex here. And here the height is 3. And after 7 seconds, the function's height here starts increasing again, which means that at the vertex here, we reach the minimum height of 3. So after 7 seconds of the ball rolling on this track, we reach the vertex, which we can see from this parabola here that it's the minimum height of the function. So after 7 seconds of rolling, the ball reaches its minimum height at the vertex. So we can use that to answer the question of how to interpret the vertex. So after 7 seconds, the ball reaches its minimum height at the vertex, which is what answer choice A says here, that the ball's minimum height was 3 inches above the ground. The function f gives the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit that corresponds to a temperature of x kelvins. If a temperature increased by 2.1 kelvins, by how much did the temperature increase in degrees Fahrenheit? So we have this function f that gives us the temperature in Fahrenheit as a function of the temperature in Kelvin, x. And the question is asking us, how much would f of x increase if x increased by 2.1 kelvins? So we can distribute out this 9 over 5 to these two terms. So this new function, f of x, would look like 9 over 5 times x minus 9 over 5 times 273.15, and then the plus 32. But we only care about what's going on with this term, because this x is our independent variable, which means its coefficient is the slope of this line. So when we increase x by 1, the value of f of x increases by 9 over 5. So in this case, if we're increasing x by 2.1 kelvins, then that means the value of f of x would just increase by 9 over 5 times 2.1. So this would be the change in f of x after a 2.1 increase in x. So if you multiplied this out using a calculator, you would just get 3.78, which is answer choice A. The table gives the coordinates of 2 points on a line in the xy plane. The y-intercept of the line is k minus 5, comma b, where k and b are constants. What is the value of b? Okay, so we have this table that gives us 2 points, k, comma 13, and k plus 7, comma negative 15, that are on a line. We'll say this line is y equals mx plus b. And here, this b in the y-intercept is also this b here, since the b term in the y equals mx plus b is the y-intercept, the value of y at the y-intercept, and here b is also the value of y at the y-intercept. So since the y-intercept is at k minus 5, comma b, and we know that at the y-intercept, the value of x, the x coordinate, is always 0. So k minus 5 has to equal 0, which means that k equals 5. Okay, now that we know the value of k, we can turn these coordinates into coordinates with just numbers instead of k. So the first one becomes 5, comma 13, and the second one becomes 7 plus 5, which is 12, comma negative 15. So now we have these 2 points on the line, and we can easily just solve for all the components of the line. So to find the slope, we can just find the rise over run between these 2 points. So we can do 13 minus negative 15 to find the change in y. Divide that by the change in x, 5 minus 12, which will give us 13 minus negative 15 is just 13 plus 15, which is 28. And then 5 minus 12 is negative 7. So the slope, or our m value, is negative 4. Now that we have the slope, we can just plug in a point like 5, comma 13 to solve for b. So our current equation looks like y equals negative 4x plus b. But let's plug in the point 5, comma 13. So this will give us an x and a y value. So our y will be 13, and then our x will be 5. So 4 times 5. And then we'll solve for the value of b, which will give us the y-intercept. So 13 equals negative 4 times 5, which is negative 20, plus b. So that means if we move this negative 20 to the other side, b equals 33. So this is the y value of the y-intercept of this function. So the value of b is 33. So that's the answer. One of the factors of 2x cubed plus 42x squared plus 208x is x plus b, where b is a positive constant. What is the smallest possible value of b? Okay, so we need to factor this expression here. So let's find some factors. So let's take out a 2x common out, since all of these terms have a 2x in them. So the first term will become just x squared. The second term will become 21x, and the third term will become 104. This will just give back the original equation, but we factored out a 2x. Okay, so in here, this looks like a quadratic, and we can just factor this by grouping. So we'll just factor this alone. So we need to split this middle term into two terms whose coefficients, when multiplied together, will equal 104. So those two numbers are 8 and 13. So we'll split 21x into 8x plus 13x, which equals 21x. But now the coefficient of the x terms, 8 and 13, when multiplied together, equal 1 times 104. And this splitting of the x term will allow us to factor by grouping. Here, you'll see it here. When we factor out an x from these first two terms, we'll be left with x plus 8. And then we can factor out a 13 from these two terms. So when we factor out a 13, the first term is just x, and the second term will be an 8. Okay, now we see that this x plus 8 quantity is common to both of these terms. So we can factor this 8x plus 8 from both. So when we do that, let's go up here. We'll be left with an x plus 8 on the outside, and then we'll be multiplying x plus 8 with an x and a 13. So x plus 13. Okay, so then let's plug this factored expression back into our original equation, our expression. So we'll have 2x times x plus 8 plus, and then x plus 13. So this is completely factored form of our original expression up here. Okay, and we need to find factors that are of the form x plus b. So x plus some constant. So only these two are of the form x plus some constant. Here, this is x plus 8, and this is x plus 13. This factor here is just a constant being multiplied with x. It's not of the form x plus b, so we won't consider this one. So here we have x plus 8 as a factor and x plus 13. And the question asked us for the smallest possible value of b. So b can either be 8 or b can either be 13. But we need the smallest possible value of b, so we'll choose 8 as our answer. So the answer is 8 for the smallest possible value of b. Function f is defined by f of x equals 7x minus 84. What is the x-intercept of the graph of y equals f of x in the xy plane? Okay, so we have this. Let's draw a quick little graph of what this function looks like. So this is our xy plane, and this function is a line with a positive slope and a y-intercept of negative 84. So the line begins way down here at a y value of negative 84, and it's a linear increasing line. So the slope is positive. And we need to find the x-intercept, which is where the line crosses the x-axis. And we need to know the x value of that, so the x-coordinate of the point that it crosses the x-axis. These are the axes. So the x-intercept occurs always when the y value is 0. And we have this function here, so we can just plug in 0 for y, or f of x, and solve for the value of x when y is 0. So when y is 0, this f of x, since y equals f of x, becomes 0. And that equals 7x minus 84. And we'll solve for the value of x to see the value of x that this function has when y is 0. That'll give us the x-intercept. So we'll move this 84 to the other side by adding 84 to both sides. So we'll have 84 equals 7x. And then we'll divide both sides by 7. And when we divide both sides by 7, this will just become a 1x. And we'll see that the value of x is equal to 84 over 7, which if you put in your calculator, or if you know your tables, is just 12. So the value of the x-coordinate at the x-intercept is 12. So the coordinate of this point is an x value of 12, and y is just 0, since y is always 0 on the x-axis. So the correct answer choice is D. Certain park has an area of 11,863,808 square yards. What is the area in square miles of this park? And 1 mile is equal to 1,760 yards. So the area of this park is this large number in yards, and we need to convert that into square miles. So we know that 1 mile equals 1,760 yards. So if we have, like, say, a square, and it's 1 mile on each side, that means that it's also 1,760 yards on each side. So each of the sides is 1,760 yards. And if this is just 1 square mile, then that means that 1 square mile is equal to 1,760 times 1,760 yards. So if we do 1,760 times 1,760, we get, let's put that into our calculator, 1760 times 1760. So that's 3,097,600 yards, square yards. So that's equal to 1 square mile. And since we're given that 11,863,808 square yards is the area, if we multiply that with 1 square mile divided by 3,097,600 square yards, then the square yards here will cancel out, and we'll be left with units of square miles. So when we divide 11,863,808 by the number of square yards in 1 mile, we'll get a value of 3.83 if we plug that into our calculator. So this will equal 3.83. And that will be in units of square miles, which is answer choice B. One gallon of paint will cover 220 square feet of a surface. A room has a total wall area of W square feet. Which equation represents the total amount of paint P in gallons needed to paint the walls of the room twice? So we have a wall, and its area is W square feet. And we need to paint this wall twice. So that means the total amount of area we have to cover is 2W. And the amount of paint needed to cover any amount of area, we just need to divide the area by 220 square feet. Because dividing the area that we need to paint by 220 feet will give us the number of gallons we need to cover that area. And the amount of gallons we need to paint the wall twice will be equal to P. So this equation here represents the scenario where 2W is the total area we need to cover, 220 is the total amount of square feet that 1 gallon would cover. So 2W divided by 220 will give us the total amount of gallons of paint we need, which is P. So we can just simplify this down. So 2 divided by 220 can be simplified to 1 over 110. So P equals W over 110, which is answer choice A. In the given system of equations, R is a constant. If the system has no solution, what is the value of R? So we have these two lines right here. We'll call them equation 1 and equation 2. And we need to find a value of R such that this system of equation has no solution. And a system of equation of two lines has no solution when the lines are distinct and parallel. So say this line is line 1 and this one is line 2 on the xy plane. These lines here, they're parallel and they're distinct, meaning that their y-intercepts are different. So these two lines will never intersect, which means they have no solution. So we need to make sure that these two lines, after we plug in the value of R, we need to find a value of R such that the slopes are different on these two lines so that they never intersect, meaning this so that there's no solution. So the first equation we have, let's write it in the form y equals mx plus b. So we can do that by moving this 48x to the other side. So we'll be left with negative 72y equals negative 48x plus 30y plus 24. So we just subtracted negative 48x from both sides. And then let's move the 30y to the other side by subtracting 30y from both sides. So on the left, we'll be left with 102y equals negative 48x plus 24. And then let's get y alone. So let's divide both sides by negative 102. So on the left, we'll be left with just y. Then we'll have a negative 48 over a negative 102x, and then 24 over negative 102. Okay, so now we have the first equation, equation 1, in the form y equals mx plus b. So this is in the form y equals mx plus b. M is negative 48 over negative 102, and b is 24 over negative 102. So now let's write the second equation in terms of, in the form y equals mx plus b. So we have ry equals 1/6 minus 16x. So let's divide both sides by r so that we get y isolated. So when we do that, the left-hand side will just have a y, and then this will be 1 over 6r minus 16 over r times x. Okay, so now we have this equation in the form y equals mx plus b as well. The m this time is just negative. And in order for these two equations to have no solution, they need to be parallel, which means the slopes need to be the same. So the slope of the first equation is 48 over 102. The negative divided by negative is just a positive. And that needs to be equal to the slope of the second equation, which is negative 16 over r. So now we can just solve for the value of r. So we can cross multiply. So multiplying the corners. So 48r equals negative 16 times 102. So that means 48r equals, if we get out our calculator, 16 times 102 is 1,632. And this will be negative since the 16 was negative. And then we can divide both sides by 48 to find the value of r. So 1,632 divided by 48 is equal to 34. And this will be negative since the 1,632 was negative. So negative 34. So for an r value of negative 34, these two equations have no solution because they will be distinct in parallel lines. Negative 34. We know they're distinct because 1 over 6 times negative 34 is not equal to 24 over negative 102. So that means that they have different y-intercepts, but the slopes, when we plug in a value of negative 34 as r, the slopes will be the same. So they'll be parallel lines. So r equals negative 34. In the given equation, c is a positive constant. Which of the following is one of the solutions to the given equation? So we have this equation here, and we need to find the value of x. So what x equals to. So we need to isolate for x. And we can do that by moving all the x terms to one side. So we'll move this term here to the other side with the other x's by subtracting this from both sides. So on the left, we'll have x squared over square root x squared minus c squared minus c squared over square root x squared minus c squared. So we just move this to the other side by subtracting it from both sides. So when we subtract this from the left, we'll just have this but negative. And on the right, this term minus itself will just cancel out. So we'll only have a 39 left on the right side. Now, since these two have the same denominator, we can add these fractions together. And the second fraction is negative, so we'll just subtract c squared from x squared. So we'll be left with x squared minus c squared all over the square root of x squared minus c squared. And this will all still equal 39. Okay, now let's get rid of this square root in the denominator, and we can do that by squaring both sides. So we'll square this and we'll square this. Since we're squaring both sides, this equation still remains true. Okay, so x squared minus c squared whole squared. This is the same as just writing x squared minus c squared times x minus c squared, since that's what an exponent of 2 does. You just multiply the term by itself, and that will be divided by just x squared minus c squared. Since squaring a square root cancels it out, so we'll just be left with what's inside. Okay, so that gets rid of the square root, since a square root squared cancels out. And then this will all still be equal to 39 squared. Okay, now we can see that the denominator is x squared minus c squared, and both of these terms are x squared minus c squared. So we can cancel out one of the x squared minus c squared on the top with the denominator. So x squared minus c squared over x squared minus c squared is just 1. So, and then anything multiplied by 1 doesn't change it. So we'll just still have x squared minus c squared equals 39 squared. So because the denominator was equal to one of the terms in the numerator, we can just cancel it out. So now that we have x squared minus c squared equals 39 squared, let's isolate x by moving the c squared to the other side. So we'll add a c squared to both sides. This will cancel out the c squared here. So we'll have an x squared on the left, and then we'll have a positive c squared on the right. So c squared plus 39 squared. And then let's take the square root of both sides to get rid of this square, since the square root of a square is just the term that's inside. So we'll have x equals c squared plus 39 squared square rooted. Okay, and since this is a square root, this number here is actually a positive or a negative. Both are solutions. So positive square root c squared plus 39 squared is a solution, and negative square root c squared plus 39 squared is a solution. That's why the problem statement here said give one of the solutions to the given equation, since there are two solutions. One is positive, one is negative. Okay, and of all the answer choices, the only one that shows one of the solutions is answer choice D, because this right here shows the negative solution, and we still have the square root c squared plus 39 squared, but it shows us the negative solution of the square root. So D is the answer. In the given quadratic function, a and c are constants. The graph of y equals f of x in the xy plane is a parabola that opens upward and has a vertex at the point hk, where h and k are constants. If k is less than 0 and f of negative 9 equals f of 3, which of the following must be true? Okay, so we have this parabola here, and we are told that this parabola opens upwards. So, which means the vertex of this parabola is the minimum, and this parabola opens upward. So it'll look something like this. Okay, and we're also told that k, which is the y-coordinate of the vertex, is less than 0, which means the vertex should be somewhere down where the y-axis in the negative y-axis. And f of negative 9 equals f of 3. Okay, this should tell us the x-coordinate of the vertex. So what this is saying is that our parabola on the xy plane, say it looks something like this, it's telling us that at an x-coordinate of negative 9 and an x-coordinate of 3, the function, say these 2 points, have the same y value. The value of f of x at negative 9 and 3 is the same. And a parabola has a property that for equal y values at 2 points on a parabola, they are equidistant from the vertex of the parabola. That means an x value of negative 9 is on the parabola is equidistant from the vertex. So the distance from the vertex, the horizontal distance to negative 9, is the same as the distance from the vertex to 3. And the value that is in between negative 9 and 3 is negative 3. So that means the vertex of this graph is at an x value of negative 3. And h is equal to the x-coordinate of the vertex. That means h is equal to negative 3. So that's the vertex of the graph. And we can write the formula for a quadratic in vertex form. So vertex form looks like this. So we have a x minus h whole squared plus b. So that's the vertex form of a graph. This b can be the k value, where h and k are the vertices are the coordinates of the vertex of the graph. So we know that f of x equals a times x, so h here is equal to negative 3. So this becomes a positive 3 whole squared plus k. Okay, so now let's expand out this square term. So this will become a times x squared plus 6ax plus 9a plus k. Okay, and then we can see that the ax squared is still there, and that this term right here is the coefficient. The 6a is the coefficient of the x term. And we know from the formula that they gave us that the coefficient of the x term is 4. So that means 6a has to equal 4. So this will give us the value of a. So that means a is equal to 2 over 3. Okay, and then we can also find some more information. So here, 9a, a is just a constant, so 9a is just a constant, and k is just a constant. That's just the y value of the vertex. And 9a plus k should equal c, because c is the sum of all constants in the original equation. So 9a plus k has to equal c, because this quadratic is the same as this one. We just wrote it in vertex form. So 9a plus k equals c. So then let's plug in the value of a equals 2/3 into this equation. So 9 times 2/3 is just equal to 6. Then plus k is equal to c. So this means that k is equal to c minus 6. Okay, and we knew that k is less than 0. So for k to be less than 0, we need to choose a c value accordingly so that k is less than 0. And really, c needs to be any value that is less than -6. Or not less than -6, just less than 6. Because at a c value of 6, 6 minus 6 is 0. So anything less than 6, say 5, 5 minus 6 is -1. This makes k less than 0. So anything less than 6 will give us a k value that is less than 0, which means c needs to be anything less than 6. Okay, but values less than 6 can either be positive or negative. They can be values, say, 4 or -10. Both of them still work. So this means that c can be either positive or negative. So that means we can rule out this answer A here. Because answer A is saying that c is always less than 0, which means c is always negative. But we can see here that c can be positive numbers, like 4. So c can be anything less than 6, so it can be equal to some positive numbers. So we can rule out answer A here, or the first answer. And then the second answer is saying that a has to be greater than or equal to 1. But we found that a is equal to 2/3, which is less than 1. So we can rule out the second answer choice here. So none of these were true, which means that neither 1 or 2 are correct. So the correct answer is answer choice D.